At precisely 9:45 a.m. today, May 1st, 2026, a sleek black armored motorcade arrived outside the Waldorf Astoria in the center of Manhattan. Against the backdrop of blaring sirens and the restless noise of New York City crowds, King Charles III emerged with a composure that felt less like calm and more like calculated defiance. This is far more than a routine state visit. It signals the start of something far more deliberate and administrative dismantling. As global attention locks onto the monarch stepping into the American spotlight 3,000 miles away in Montecito, Prince Harry has reportedly received a notice that removes what little protection he had left. A classified memo from the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office, working in coordination with the United States Secret Service, has formally suspended all of Harry's international security arrangements for the duration of the King's time in the U.S. The communication itself was described as precise, emotionless, and final. Insiders say it consisted of a single-page document stating that the British government no longer considers the Duke of Sussex a protected individual under international agreements. These developments come less than 48 hours after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Washington. While many expected the royal visit to be canceled, King Charles reportedly issued a direct command to proceed as planned. According to palace sources, he made it clear behind closed doors that the monarchy does not yield to acts of violence and that matters of state rise above personal risk. This keep calm and carry on approach is more than tradition. It's a calculated public relations move. By standing firm where others might retreat, the king presents himself as a resolute leader, while casting a stark contrast over his son, who continues to push for publicly funded security. If this level of royal maneuvering interests you, make sure to like and subscribe. We're following every second of this story, and you won't want to miss what happens when the sealed files are revealed on June 12th. Share your thoughts on the rule of law below. Do you believe anyone should stand above? Inside room 502 of the Waldorf Astoria, just hours ago, senior British officials met with representatives from the U.S. Department of State. Their objective was singular: contain and isolate the Harry situation entirely. What unfolded this morning in New York signals a historic shift. For the first time in over a millennium, the monarchy has not only withdrawn protection from a royal by blood, but has effectively opened the door for a foreign legal system. Reports indicate that Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has been central to this strategic distance. While the king prepares for formal engagements, William has ensured that the issue surrounding Harry is no longer an international diplomatic concern, but instead a domestic legal matter for U.S. authorities. By removing Harry's diplomatic standing years ago and placing him under a standard visa category, the palace has allowed Washington to act without concerns over sovereign immunity. As of 10:15 a.m. today, the legal team at the Heritage Foundation has been informed that the delay surrounding the release of the 2,500-page immigration file remains in place until June 12th. The timing is no coincidence. It lands exactly 48 hours after the king is set to leave U.S. soil. The objective is clear: prevent any legal fallout tied to Harry's potential visa issues from overshadowing the significance of the royal visit. Sources within the Foreign Office suggest that the king's decision to maintain distance was rooted in a strict reading of the law. One official reportedly remarked that the privileges of the crown are reserved only for those who uphold it. By declining to intervene in the ongoing Freedom of Information Act case, the palace has effectively signaled that Harry must now face matters alone. The silence is heavy and decisive. Harry now stands isolated, facing a 2,500-page file that could dismantle his future in America. If those documents confirm that he failed to disclose past drug use, something he openly discussed in his memoir, the legal consequences would be unavoidable. Visa fraud carries mandatory penalties, including potential deportation, The irony is striking. The very memoir used to criticize the monarchy may now serve as the key evidence in a case that could force his removal. The clock is ticking toward June 12th. The king stands in Washington. The prince remains in the background, and the file waits to be opened. But as the noise of New York begins to fade, a deeper question surfaces. What exactly lies buried on page 1200 of that immigration file that has Homeland Security on edge? Stay with us. While public attention in 2020 remained fixed on the royal family divide, something far more consequential was quietly unfolding behind the sealed corridors of Buckingham Palace. To grasp how Harry now stands on the brink of potential deportation, we have to break down what insiders have labeled the diplomatic trap. The first move in this mechanism was set in motion 6 years ago. When Harry stepped away from his role as a working royal, the palace made a firm but understated decision. They declined to back his application for an A1 diplomatic visa. In international diplomacy, an A visa functions as a form of legal armor, granting sovereign immunity and shielding its holder from local investigations and domestic legal scrutiny. Had Harry remained under that classification, his immigration records would have been protected as state-sensitive information, effectively out of reach from the American legal system. Instead, he was directed toward the O1 visa category. Sit. On paper, the O1 is reserved for individuals with extraordinary ability, a label fitting for a global figure. But beneath that prestige lies a critical legal distinction. O1 holders are treated as standard tax residents. They fall fully under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. By removing Harry's diplomatic status, the monarchy effectively ensured that by 2026, U.S. authorities would have complete legal authority to examine his case like that of any other immigrant. Harry is no longer acting on behalf of a nation. He is simply a resident bound by the same legal framework as everyone else. That was the setup. The trigger, however, came from Harry himself. With the publication of his memoir, he handed the Heritage Foundation a detailed blueprint that could be used against him. Under the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act, specifically Section 212, admitting to the use of controlled substances constitutes a mandatory ground for inadmissibility. The process unfolds through a precise 3-step sequence of administrative exposure. Step 1. Harry openly recounts past use of cocaine, marijuana, and psychedelic substances in his book. Step 2. The Heritage Foundation initiates a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit compelling the Department of Homeland Security to cross-check those admissions against his confidential DS-160 visa application. If Harry answered a no to the required question about past drug use to obtain his visa, that discrepancy qualifies as visa fraud. There is no room for discretion here. Under the law, visa fraud automatically triggers revocation of residency and opens the path to deportation. And because Harry holds an O1 visa, he has no diplomatic protection to halt this process. There are no royal safeguards, no sovereign immunity, and no diplomatic interventions available. The palace has adopted what officials describe as positive neutrality, a term that carries a calculated coldness. In practice, it means deliberately stepping aside to allow the American legal system to proceed without interference. Legal advisors in London are fully aware of how this mechanism operates. By letting events unfold naturally, they ensure that any potential deportation becomes strictly a domestic U.S. matter rather than an international dispute involving the crown. The Duke of Sussex is no longer treated as a protected figure. Instead, he has become a legal liability, caught in a system that was carefully structured and ready to activate the moment his own account became public. Yet as June 12th approaches, one unsettling question lingers. If the records reveal that Harry received a special waiver, who authorized it and what was exchanged behind the scenes? The documents remain sealed. The timeline is tightening, and the situation has entered its most volatile stage. For the Duke of Sussex, June 12th is no longer a distant possibility. It now looms as a decisive moment. To fully understand the significance of today's developments out of Washington, we need to examine the calculated sequence of events over the past week, a timeline that appears to have methodically removed Harry from the institutional framework of the British state. It began on April 25th. In London. During the Anzac Day commemorations, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped forward as the leading representative of both the King and Prince William, but it was a subtle action that carried deeper meaning. When signing the official guest book, Catherine placed her name first, followed by William's. This was not a breach of protocol. It was a deliberate signal of continuity. By positioning the princess at the forefront of a military tribute so closely tied to Harry's former identity, the palace demonstrated that its structure remains fully intact without him. The space he once occupied has not only been filled, it has been reinforced and modernized. Just 24 hours later, on April 26th, the narrative took a sharp turn in Washington. Following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, the political tone shifted dramatically. Trump publicly praised King Charles as a brave and great ambassador, while at the same time dismissing Harry as someone who no longer represents the United Kingdom. With that statement, whatever cultural influence the Duke still held on the international stage was significantly diminished. This public backing of the sovereign by a potential future president creates a powerful law and order pincer effect. Trump has turned Harry into a symbol of elite privilege, putting pressure on the current administration to demonstrate that the rule of law applies equally, even to a prince by birth. That brings us to today, May 1st. At exactly 9:00 a.m. in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Department of State confirmed a calculated delay, one that serves as the final layer in Harry's growing isolation. The 2,500-page immigration file, originally scheduled for review this week, has now been formally postponed until June 12th. This delay does not benefit Harry. It protects the king. By keeping the record sealed until after the state visit concludes, both the palace and the State Department have ensured that the monarch's presence in America remains untouched by the looming legal fallout surrounding his son. The next key date is May 25th. As King Charles and Queen Camilla prepare for a landmark tea at the White House, reports indicate that a 10-mile diplomatic exclusion zone will be enforced. Harry is not merely left off the guest list. He is being both legally and physically kept away from all official proceedings. The contrast is unmistakable. The king stands as the embodiment of the nation, while the Duke has been reduced to a domestic legal complication, observing from a distance as his family reinforces the alliance between two global powers. Everything now converges on June 12th, Judgment Day. This is when the 2,500-page file is expected to be unsealed, and its contents will point to one of two outcomes. Either Harry received a rare, undisclosed waiver regarding his admitted drug use, or he denied it on his application, an act that would constitute visa fraud and carry mandatory consequences. Throughout this 42-day countdown, the palace's silence has been its most strategic move. They have moved forward. They have filled the gap. And when June 12th arrives, they will allow the American legal system to determine whether the man who publicly challenged the crown still has a place in the country he now calls home. But as the king arrives in Washington, the central question shifts. It is no longer just about Harry's future, but about what the king may have already known about those sealed records before leaving London. Sometimes the weight of a person's fate can be measured in pages. Inside a high-security vault within a Washington, D.C. court, a 2,500-page dossier sits untouched, awaiting June 12th. This is not a routine collection of paperwork. It is a comprehensive forensic account of Prince Harry's entry into the United States. At the core of this file lies a single critical document, the DS-160 visa application. For most immigrants, this form represents a binding declaration of truth. For Harry, it may become something far more severe, a legal point of no return. The framework leading to this moment rests on three unyielding pillars. First, the DS-160 itself, which includes a direct question about past use of controlled substances. Second, the Department of Homeland Security, now operating under a court mandate to justify why these records should remain confidential. And third, the strict enforcement mechanism within U.S. immigration law, where proven visa fraud triggers automatic consequences. The Department of Justice has little room for leniency in such cases. If an individual admits to drug use publicly but denies it on an official federal application, the law requires mandatory revocation of residency. Within Washington's legal circles, the Heritage Foundation has made its position unmistakably clear. The law must remain blind to status and titles. Their argument highlights the striking irony at the center of this case. The same admissions of cocaine, marijuana, and psychedelic use that helped sell Harry's memoir may now serve as the foundation for dismantling his position in the United States. Sources within the Department of Justice indicate that the file may include internal DHS communications dating back to 2021. These documents reportedly reveal early concerns over inconsistencies in Harry's declarations, as officials debated whether to extend a high-profile waiver or follow standard enforcement procedures. In just the past few hours, the political climate surrounding this case has intensified dramatically. Speaking to a packed press group in Washington, Donald Trump delivered what many are calling a decisive blow to Harry's standing. His remarks were direct and unfiltered. "I know Harry doesn't speak for the United Kingdom. In fact, I think I represent the UK better than Harry." By positioning himself as a more credible voice in US-UK relations than a royal figure, Trump has reshaped the narrative entirely. Harry is no longer viewed as a visiting royal. He has been recast as an immigration case, caught in the center of a growing political storm. Harry now finds himself trapped between two conflicting realities: the public record he authored himself and the confidential record held by the federal government. Throughout this morning, the palace has responded to mounting questions about the mandatory revocation process with a single detached line: "We do not comment on the private legal matters of the Duke of Sussex." That silence is not passive, it is deliberate. By declining to offer any character support or diplomatic appeal, the King and Prince William have effectively stepped aside, allowing the American legal system to operate without interference. The process is already underway, and it requires no further input. If the June 12th unsealing exposes any inconsistency, the Department of Homeland Security will have little choice but to initiate removal proceedings, if only to avoid accusations of preferential treatment. At this point, the prince is no longer a figure. He is a case file, and the pages are moving closer to a conclusion. But as the legal pressure intensifies, a more troubling situation is beginning to unfold within Harry's inner circle, a form of financial and social isolation that is quietly transforming his California life into what analysts are calling a liquidation trap. Who, if anyone, remains in his corner when the file is finally revealed? While the king and queen sit down for tea in the White House state dining room this afternoon, the reality nearly 3,000 miles away in Montecito is starkly different: quiet, costly, and increasingly unstable. For Prince Harry, losing royal protection is no longer symbolic. It's existential. Financial experts are now pointing to a cascading effect triggered by the palace's firm stance of detachment. The turning point came the moment the A1 diplomatic visa option was definitively removed. In the United States, the difference between a state-protected royal and a private citizen is measured in millions. As a working royal, Harry's security was covered under international arrangements, coordinated through government channels at no personal expense. Now, as a private resident, he must rely on privately contracted security teams. These firms, unlike federal agents, carry no official authority, Yet their costs are staggering, reportedly exceeding $2 million every quarter. And that's only the beginning. By holding an O-1 visa, Harry is treated as a standard U.S. tax resident. Without sovereign protections over his global income, the Internal Revenue Service now has full authority to scrutinize his finances, including earnings from his high-profile media agreements. In industries like Hollywood and Silicon Valley, influence is tied to access. As it becomes increasingly clear that Harry has no direct connection to the king and that the British government is actively distancing itself, his value as a partner is rapidly declining. The media deals that once promised long-term financial independence are reportedly losing momentum. The Sussex brand was built on proximity to a 1,000-year-old institution. Without visible backing from the crown, that connection weakens. He is no longer perceived as a gateway to the monarchy, but as a figure entangled in legal uncertainty. Insiders suggest that major contracts are being quietly renegotiated or allowed to lapse altogether, leaving Harry with an extremely expensive lifestyle and fewer reliable income streams to sustain it. In many ways, he is confined within a gilded structure of his own making, maintaining the appearance of influence while the foundation beneath it is steadily eroding. The financial strain is further amplified by escalating legal costs tied to the Heritage Foundation lawsuit, a battle he must now fight alone without any royal legal support. Each headline surrounding his immigration status chips away at his public image, forcing him to spend even more on legal defense and public relations just to contain the fallout from his own past statements. As the king lifts a teacup in Washington, a quiet symbol of continuity, Harry is left reviewing invoices and tax obligations. The contrast is stark. It reflects a man who exchanged institutional protection for independence and is now confronting the full cost of that decision. What once appeared to be freedom is increasingly resembling a structured unraveling, where the same family he sought to outshine has ensured that the legal and financial systems would operate without him. And now, as his resources tighten and his circle narrows, a more unsettling possibility is beginning to surface within policy circles. What if the June 12th reveal uncovers not just a discrepancy, but evidence of a confidential agreement that has already been violated? As this unprecedented legal storm approaches, the question is no longer whether the truth will emerge, but how the consequences will be contained. On the morning of May 1st, 2026, the geopolitical chessboard is fully in place, and the possible outcomes for the Duke of Sussex have narrowed to 3 high-stakes scenarios. The first, and most explosive, carries roughly a 20% probability. If the June 12th unsealing confirms clear evidence of visa fraud, the consequences could unfold with brutal speed. Within 24 hours, the administrative process could trigger immediate action. By June 13th, Harry could be facing a formal removal order, escorted to a private terminal, boarding a flight to a destination that may no longer feel like home. What makes this outcome especially stark is that Buckingham Palace has already moved on. By redistributing every ceremonial and military role Harry once held, the institution has ensured that no formal place awaits him in the United Kingdom. In legal terms, he risks becoming a man without a base, a prince in exile with no clear return point. The second path, estimated at a 30% likelihood, is one of reputational collapse. In this scenario, Harry mounts an aggressive legal challenge against the U.S. government in an effort to block deportation. While this could delay immediate consequences, it would open the door to another kind of downfall. The legal cost alone would be immense, steadily draining his remaining resources. At the same time, the discovery phase of such a case would push even more private and potentially damaging information into public view. He may remain in America, but as a diminished figure, locked in continuous litigation, with his public image tied permanently to controversy and desperation. The third and most probable outcome, holding a 50% likelihood, is what insiders have begun calling a royal quarantine. As Washington's political climate leans towards stricter law and order policies, Harry's immigration file transforms into a powerful negotiating tool. Rather than pursuing a dramatic deportation that could strain diplomatic ties, U.S. authorities, potentially with quiet approval from the palace, may leverage the threat of the 2,500-page dossier to enforce complete silence. In this scenario, Harry remains in California, but under an unspoken condition: withdraw from public criticism of the monarchy and step away from the global spotlight. For the palace, this outcome is strategically ideal. There is no desire to bring him back into the fold where he could create internal disruption. Instead, the objective is distance, containment, irrelevance, and neutrality. The reasoning behind this approach is precise. The Crown prioritizes institutional continuity above personal relationships. By allowing the American system to maintain pressure, they have effectively delegated the management of a difficult situation to an external authority. As the King's aircraft prepares to depart Washington, leaving behind the applause of a successful state visit, that 2,500-page file remains sealed within a federal vault. The countdown to June 12th is no longer slow, it's accelerating. Harry may still walk the grounds of his Montecito estate, removed from the noise of city life and the flash of cameras, but he cannot distance himself from the documented reality tied to his own signed statements. The door to his American refuge is beginning to close, and the key may lie with the very institution he once challenged. When those seals are finally broken, who will remain standing? Make sure you're subscribed to follow our full breakdown when the files are unsealed on June 12th. This could become one of the most consequential royal legal developments in modern history, and we'll be covering every moment of what follows. Like the video if you believe the rule of law applies equally to all, and share your view below on which scenario you think will unfold. The truth is approaching fast, and the House of Windsor has already turned the page. See you in the next update.